It is bittersweet that we enter off-season mode. I love the off-season. I wish it wasn't here so soon. But what is the state of the Giants going into 2024? How are they going to improve?
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you so much for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube. Please check us out there, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. Also, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And coming up on today's show, like I said, it is bittersweet that it's off-season mode. The Giants' season is over, even though they have more games to play. They've definitely been eliminated now. No tiebreaker math necessary. They cannot get to 82 wins, which would be a bare minimum to make it. In fact, they need to sweep LA just to finish at 500. So ugly, unacceptable. I've done like 3 episodes in a row kind of harping on all that. But I think today is when we turn the page, not to say that, oh, let's just forget about this season, but just to kind of give you a primer on what's to come, kind of beyond the possibility of significant shakeups in the front office and or the coaching staff, which I think is possible. And that kind of stuff could happen sooner rather than later. Like as soon as the season ends is typically, other teams start playing in the playoffs, and teams that didn't make it maybe make changes. And so we'll see about that. And this show, it doesn't end when the season ends. We go all year on Locked On Giants. But just to give you a preview, I think some of the most where I want to start is like who's definitely not coming back, i.e. what I really mean there is who is a free agent. And we're doing this in order of kind of the size of the salary. And the first one is Joc Pederson is a free agent. So I'm going to name these guys and kind of name whether or not I think they should be back. And Joc Pederson, don't think he should be back. And when we look back on it, I know a lot of you were vocal about how giving him $19.65 million with the qualifying offer was a little bit outrageous for a platoon DH. And that proved to be true, I would say. So you were right. Those of you who said that, mostly because he just hasn't performed. If he performed this year the same way he did last year, then I think it would be okay. But when you're such a limited player, like you do one thing, and that one thing is hit right-handed pitching, and he's just done it kind of okay as opposed to impact, like in an impact way, well, then I don't see them bringing him back, especially with the season that Wilmer Flores had and the fact that you've got LaMonte Wade Jr. We'll discuss his contract status when we look at first base. I definitely don't like Wilmer Flores playing any position other than first, except on a somewhat emergency basis. But if you let Joc Pederson go, it would open up like the DH spot to just Wilmer Flores being more or less an everyday DH type. So I think that in that sense, you just like Flores was so much more valuable with the bat than Pederson this year, and it takes away a platoon situation. Flores can hit lefties and righties. So we'll get to Flores' contract status later. But for Pederson, it's $19.65 million. It's wiped clean off the slate. He's a free agent, and I doubt he'll be back. The next one is Brandon Crawford at $16 million. So this is a whole different story. The story here, number one, I don't think he comes back because the performance has been abysmal. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He's been really bad this year. Last year wasn't so hot either. And it's $16 million. Obviously, even if he did come back, it would be nothing close to $16 million. But, the big deal is he's on the IL right now, but he's going to come off the IL on Sunday, the last day of the season. And I really do hope, I'm not going, but I hope that fans show up to say goodbye to Brandon Crawford, because that's probably the last time you'll see him play for the Giants and maybe play in his career. There's a chance he retires. He hasn't been clear about what his intentions are, but we'll cross that bridge when it comes, in terms of giving him his due respect and send off and all that. But right now I'm just kind of priming you for the offseason. Crawford's little 2-year, $32 million extension also in hindsight looks very bad. He just did not at all come close to replicating his 2021 fourth place MVP season. Pure free agent after the year, and I think he'll be gone as well. Next player is Alex Wood, and I think that at least so far with Pederson and Wood, I'm not sure people are too upset about it. And even Crawford, with all due respect, as much as he's a legend and is loved forever, you don't just, it wasn't working out. And the future is not Brandon Crawford at the shortstop position. Obviously, he's going to be 37 years old soon. But Alex Wood, yes, that 2-year, $25 million extension, another contract that did not work out after a good 2021. It's a lot of these guys fooled the front office, and because Wood was really good in 21, and they gave him a 2-year extension or a new 2-year deal, and he was just pretty bad the whole time. And thankfully, his contract is up, and I don't expect him to be back. So that's 3 for 3 with free agents whom, they're just probably not going to be back, and it's not really a big deal in terms of the team's not going to, sometimes teams have star players that reach free agency, and it's oh no, we have to bring him back. Well, that's not the case with any of these guys. And then Roberto Perez, you probably forgot about him, but he is also a free agent after the year. Remember the catcher who started the season on the team and hurt his shoulder and was out for the year? Well, it was a 1-year deal, so he also reaches free agency after the season. And so actually there are 3 more players here, arbitration-eligible players in Jacob Junis. They were in their last year of arbitration, I should say. Jacob Junis, John Brebbia, and Scott Alexander. Now, I could see a case for bringing back any of these 3 guys. Keep in mind, their salaries this year, we're talking, $2.8 million for Junis, $2.3 million for Brebbia, $1.15 million for Alexander. We're talking really small potatoes numbers. And so particularly, I would say Brebbia of the 3, if you can bring him back, it just depends on what kind of contract they'll command, but they are free agents after the season, and so they have the choice to kind of test the market. And there's a chance none of them will be back. There's a chance all 3 could be back. There's a chance just some, 1 or 2 of them could be back. So remains to be seen, and I just don't think it's a huge deal regardless, although Brebbia has been a big part of the bullpen in the last couple years. So that's it for free agents. So none of them, like I said, sometimes you have players who are oh my gosh, we've got to re-sign this guy. That the Giants don't have that. And in fact, there's guys that you're happy that their contracts are up. But who's definitely coming back? And it gets complicated with some of the opt-outs. So the guaranteed contracts and the opt-outs, which are guaranteed, but they might leave anyway, we'll get into those in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite event, whether it's sports, theater, or anything else, shouldn't have to be stressful. This is supposed to be a lot of fun going to these events. Well, why should the ticket buying experience kind of ruin it ahead of time for you? I know it used to for me particularly like when I've traveled on the road to see the Giants, which I've done a lot. I've never been to some of these stadiums, and you're looking at a two-dimensional map of the seats, and how am I supposed to know, like, how high is that? What kind of angle am I looking at from there? And, that is relieved, that is solved, that problem. With Game Time, you get images of seat views. And then another thing I always worry about is price. I'm a stickler for price. Am I getting the best price? With Game Time, you get the lowest price guarantee, which means if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will simply credit you 110% of the difference. So snag the tickets, take the guesswork out of buying them with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Alrighty, here we go. We're going to get into the guaranteed commitments for the Giants. This is where the rubber meets the road, because we start seeing basically how much money are they going to have to spend on free agents or on players they acquire via trade or whatever. Basically, how much money do they have to spend to get... This year, their payroll was over $190 million. My theory, which I haven't seen any other reporters talking about except me, is that, like, for the longest time, for like 3 straight years, they were at around 160 million. And then randomly this year, they go up to 190 million. Well, maybe it wasn't so random, because each Major League team got a like $30 million payment from the sale of BAM Tech to Disney. And so, to me, the Giants seemingly just took that extra $30 million, true to their word. Their goal is to break even financially. And so they're like, well, 160 million was kind of where we're at in terms of breaking even. And then you just get a windfall of an extra 30 million, and they just put it right into payroll. But that's not happening in 2024. And so are they going to go down by $30 million in payroll? That's going to be a huge question for the offseason. And if they do, they need to get called out on it when Farhan Zaidi says there's no limit on spending or whatever. Nonsense. If they go back down to about 160 something million, then it's just clear and they're just lying. And so that'll be something to follow. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day, everydayers. Tomorrow, we're going to be doing a mailbag edition of the show. Now the things have totally changed since the last mailbag. Giants are eliminated. People are starting to think about the offseason, moves that the Giants could make, blah, blah, blah. Not blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's very significant. So look out on X or Twitter for the prompt, and we'll get to those tomorrow. So the guaranteed... Oh, by the way, the Giants play nobody tonight, but they welcome the Dodgers into town on Friday, and they play at 7:15 Pacific, and you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. So the first player here, and again, we're going based on the cost of the South, like in order of price here, basically, is Michael Conforto. And there's been a lot of legitimate, like respected reporters that I respect, kind of saying that they believe Michael Conforto will opt out. And I'm not so sure. I am not so sure, given just how mediocre he was, that it's a $18 million guaranteed commitment for him coming off a very mediocre season. You might just take that $18 million, hope for better fortune, and not just fortune, but just better results next year, and then try to cash in again. That's why you had this kind of structure, was in case you didn't have a great year, you could get that guaranteed $18 million for next year. So I think there's a definite chance he opts into that. But the reason people are saying he may very well opt out is because the basically corner outfield, or even just outfield market in general this offseason, is extremely weak. And so he would be one of the better players available in that market. And his agent is Scott Boras, who's no dummy. And so that could lead to Conforto opting out, but I won't believe it until I see it. And I liked Conforto. I think he's a good personality fit. I think he underperformed expectations for me by quite a bit, but was still okay. But I would be happy if he opted out, to be honest, because that's $18 million they could spend elsewhere, and I think it would be money better spent elsewhere. So the next player is Mitch Haniger, and this is not an opt-out situation. This is just a guaranteed deal, and this is the new Tommy La Stella, where people are going to be up in arms with their pitchforks, coming after me, talking about DFAing Mitch Haniger and blah, blah, blah. Again, I respect all of your opinions, but I'm simply stating facts here. Haniger is owed $17 million next year. Let's not pretend that no teams have bad contracts. And for Haniger, it was, discounting his 30-something game rookie season, it was by far the worst year of his career this year. And so I fully expect a better season out of Haniger in 2024, and he is guaranteed $17 million, and then he's got this opt-out after 2024, and if he doesn't opt out, he's owed $15.5 million in 2025. So it's not a big deal when you're talking about one player maybe whose contract there's another that we'll get to in a minute, but yeah, it doesn't look great after the season he had, but I expect him to be better, and he could, you could always try to trade him. Given what I said, the corner outfield market is weak, so maybe there's some teams that miss out on players they wanted and would be interested in Haniger, especially if the Giants paid down some of the contract. So all of that is on the table, and I just don't think it's that big of a deal that he signed for 2 more years at, people also think these prices are huge, but compared to some other players, it's kind of modest. It's a lot, but it's not crazy, and it is just 2 years left with an opt-out. So then we get to Sean Manaea, who has a $12.5 million decision to make for himself. I think he opts out, not because I think he's unhappy here. Maybe he was. The bullpen, he said last night, after the game, in which, again, he pitched brilliantly as a starter again, that moving to the bullpen was really uncomfortable for him, but then he also said it was the best thing that could have happened for him. So it was a little bit of mixed messaging. Maybe the fact that he wanted to earn his way out of the bullpen is what he means, and so it it motivated him to really, really work on his pitch quality, etc., and command and all that. And so anyway, I think he's pitched well enough over the last 4+ months to opt out of $12.5 million, and that he could do better than that on the open market, and maybe even is a guy that the Giants might want to bring back themselves. So we'll just have to wait and see on that. But I think no question, or almost no question, that he opts out. Stripling has already said that he's opting in, and it's the same contract, $12.5 million. So that's one you're not thrilled with, but you're stuck with. Okay, so there's 2 that you're not thrilled with, but you're stuck with. Anthony DeSclafani is next at $12 million. Man, he was so good at the start of the year, and then he just completely fell apart. And then he went on the IL with, I don't even remember what it was actually at this moment in time. But last year of his deal, Stripling will be entering the last year of his deal as well, $12 million for DeSclafani. So none of these so far looking good, but they're all modest deals and they're all over soon, and so it's not that big of a deal. It's obviously not a perfect scenario, but this is not disastrous payroll kind of setup. If the Giants have one thing going for them, or one of the things the Giants do have going for them, is that their books are relatively clean, including next year, but especially then if you look at 2025 and 2026. 2026, they've only got one player signed, and it's Logan Webb, and that's a guy you want under contract. Taylor Rogers is owed $12 million, and it's guaranteed, and he'll be back. Alex Cobb has a $10 million club option. I should say the Giants have a $10 million club option over Alex Cobb. Depends on what's going on with his hip, I think. Like if he needs some major surgery that has like a 12-month recovery time, then perhaps they don't pick that up. But given the last couple of years, he's been one of their best and one of the best in baseball at times pitchers. I think that that's like a very modest price to pay, especially when you consider there's a $2 million buyout. So it's really actually just an $8 million decision. I think it totally comes down to the health of his hip, basically, and what the recovery is going to look like for that. Is he going to need surgery and all that? So I hope he's back, and that would mean that they hope that he'll be healthy. But I mean, Cobb's been a good Giant and a good pitcher, and they can bring him back if they want to for $10 million. Luke Jackson, guaranteed contract, $6.5 million. Wilmer Flores, this one looks great. Guaranteed contract, $6.5 million, with a weird option for the following year. It's a player option, but then if he declines it, it becomes a club option for $5 million more. So, but he'll definitely be back in 2024, and that's great. And then Logan Webb, under contract for 5 additional seasons, and next year at just $8 million. So those are your guaranteed commitments. I have made the assumption or let's just make the assumption that Conforto and Manaea opt out, which many seem to believe will be the case. I'm not so sure about Conforto, as I said, but perhaps. If they were to take the buyout on Alex Cobb, that's only $76.5 million committed. And again, this season, their payroll was $190 million. So that they'd be well, like over $100 million short of that. If they pick up the Cobb option, you add $8 million to that, and it becomes $84.5 million. Still over $100 million short of where they were this year. But you also have to factor in the arbitration eligible players and pre-arbitration players. And so coming up in just a minute, we'll look at the Giants arbitration eligible players, and within them, that's where you start looking at extension candidates. Are there any extension candidates within that group? We will get into it in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now, you can snap into the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place just a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. I've got it pulled up. I've got FanDuel pulled up right now, and I'm looking at the 49ers, their next game, which appears to be against the Arizona Cardinals. And my goodness, the 49ers, I don't totally understand betting odds. It sometimes confuses me. But minus 1,100 for the 49ers to win, and the spread being minus 14 points at minus 110 odds. The over-under on the score being 44.5. I just think that's really interesting. And you can check out that and so much more, Super Bowl odds, all kinds of stuff over at FanDuel today. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, as promised, the arbitration-eligible players for the Giants. We'll also kind of go over pre-arbitration players and talk about, are there any extension candidates? Thanks again for making Locked on Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow, a fresh batch of mailbag questions. Oh, it is going to be fun with knowing that the Giants were eliminated, are not going to make the playoffs, are going to be probably below 500. And there's going to be a lot of questions, and we'll get to them tomorrow. So the Giants also play the Dodgers on Friday, their next game at 7:15 Pacific, and you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. So the ARB eligibles, this is, before you reach free agency, you go through arbitration. And you normally get 3 years of arbitration. Sometimes you get 4 in special cases if you are among the top 22% of players in terms of service time who have between 2 and 3 years of service time. It's making my head hurt even trying to remember the exact way it happens. But like, for example, Thairo Estrada is in arbitration now, but he gets 3 more arbitration years. Most players just get 3 arbitration years. Thairo gets 4. I think Yastrzemski is one of the guys who got 4 as well. And it just has to do with service time. Anyway, I mentioned that Junis, Brebbia, and Alexander were in their last years of arbitration this year, so they don't count. But the guys entering their final years of arbitration next year are J.D. Davis and Austin Slater. J.D. Davis this year making $4.21 million. Probably the way arbitration works is you always get a raise pretty much no matter what. And so for Davis, we'd probably be looking at like $5.5 million. And I think, 1 year, $5.5 million for what Davis has produced, I think that's a fairly easy decision to tender him a contract. I'm not saying for sure make him your starting third baseman. And if they intend to sign someone like a Matt Chapman, maybe they do non-tender a J.D. Davis. But again, all arbitration numbers for the Giants at least are pretty small potatoes. And so it's kind of like, don't get too worked up about this, but it's more about they have the ability, if they want to bring all of these players back. So the next guy is Austin Slater. He just earned $3.2 million this year, so he'd probably be in line for about $4.5 million next year, which again, if you know MLB salaries, like $4.5 million for what Austin Slater can do is a bargain. Like even in a down year like this year, he was worth way more than that, or at least somewhat more than that. And so I think it's kind of a no-brainer that you bring back Slater there. The next player, or actually the next 3 players they have 2 years of arbitration remaining. So basically 2 years of team control beyond 2023 remaining. And that's Mike Yastrzemski, who was earning $6.1 million this year, due for a raise, call it 7.8 or something million next year. It starts to get a little expensive, but I think that he is a solid player who's worth bringing back for a modest price. And yes, 7 or 8 million, 8 million or so is pretty modest. Again, for a 1-year deal for a player who's at least kind of at worst average, mediocre. Tyler Rogers is next, made $1.675 million this year. Easy decision to bring him back next year. The salary will be, closer to $3 million. Easy decision. LaMonte Wade making $1.375 million this year, and I think just an obvious decision to bring him back for what would be around, also around $3 million, a little less, probably 2.8, something like that for next year. These are such small numbers, right? If you were seeking similar value in free agency, you'd have to pay so much more, and that's why these guys get brought back, and it's kind of an easy decision. Finally, Thairo Estrada making $2.25 million this year, and with 3 more years of arbitration. He, to me, is the kind of main extension candidate here, because he'd be entering the exact same scenario as Logan Webb, 3 years of arbitration remaining going into the upcoming season. And, it will be his ages 28, 29, and 30 seasons that he's under team control for. But what if you add on a couple more years there, maybe make them club options, with the kind of incentive for Estrada being that you buy out the arbitration years, so you guarantee him quite a bit of money. Not a huge amount. We're talking like maybe $3.8 million next year, and then like $6 million the year after that, and then $9 million the year after that. So it adds up to like $17 million or something, and then you add a couple club options, guarantee him $20+ million, but you get to add on a couple extra years on the back end, potentially. Not a rush, because you do have the team control for 3 additional seasons after this one ends. So there you have it. And everybody else, all the rookies you saw, not even rookies, like Camilo Doval is pre-arbitration anyone else you can think of who I didn't name, who's kind of a young player or is newish to the league, obviously like pure rookies like Patrick Bailey, Blake Sable, Tyler Fitzgerald, Luciano, Matos, all of those guys are pre-arbitration. You get 3 pre-arbitration years before your 3 arbitration years. So all of those guys can and will be brought back. And minor league options is also a thing. Like, they don't all have to be in the major leagues if you have options. And so, but you still are in the organization unless they let you go. But the Giants don't have to let anybody else go. So that is all the time we have for today. And again, you factor in, I didn't like add up all those arbitration estimates, but it can't amount to that much just eyeballing it. 20 million or so, I don't know, just eyeballing it. And so even at that, it looked, if Conforto and Manaea were to opt out, if the Giants matched this year's payroll, they'd have about $90 million to play with. And if they went back down to like 160, they'd have about $60 million to play with. So that's what I mean when I say the books are pretty clean, actually, is that every year they're going into the offseason and it's not like they're, already committing a huge amount of money and they basically can't do anything. They're going to be able to take action, sign players this offseason, just like they have in recent offseasons. They just have to be better with the ones they sign, I think, or trade for. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Every dayers tomorrow, a mailbag edition of the show. Look out on Twitter or X for the prompt. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot. So thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who has done so already. I really do appreciate it. Anyway, I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening today. You are now Locked On Giants.